Hey guys, welcome back, and today we are talking about Broadway grosses, so let's get into it. So Anne Juliet did another solid week, going from 93% to 92%, and 1,019,715 this week, compared to last week's 993K. A Beautiful Noise went from 61% to 68%, and 852K to 952K, which is an incredible increase despite a very low capacity, and as you guys know, it is closing next month. In about a month. Back to the Future went from 88% to 91%, and 1,050,936 to 1,091,853. I've seen some people say Back to the Future is going to close, and I'm like, no, it's not. And they mean it's going to close in like September or January, and let me be honest, is it doing as good as it should be? No, but it's still making $1 million, yeah, and it's gonna do gangbusters over the summer and in the winter months, 100%. So Back to the Future, love it or hate it, it's gonna be here for a long time. Cabaret is doing amazing, selling out, going from 823K to 1,701,000 to 828. And I think is it only operating on a 7-performance schedule? I guess so. But despite really horrible reviews, it is doing insane numbers. I mean, the average ticket is higher than Merrily's right now. Hadestown went from 99.29 to 99.26 and 857K to this week's 853K. A solid week for Hadestown, and again, Hadestown seems to have survived that slump that it had, and it looks to be on Broadway for many more years to come. I did not think it was going to turn around, but it seems like the stunt casting is working, and as long as Hadestown has an 8 in front of it, it is doing solid. Even if it has a 7 in front of it, it's still doing decent. But as you guys know, in the early months of 2020, in the late months of 23, Hadestown was doing exceptionally poor and looked like it was on death's door. But I'd say as long as it doesn't go below 750, it's okay. Hamilton went from 99.26 to 98.41, and 1,897,663 to this week's 1,847,152. One of Hamilton's lesser weeks, but still doing amazing. Hell's Kitchen, which got the most Tony nominations of the season, and I have my thoughts on that, and they're not happy, went from 97% to 99%, and 776K to 1,290,438. This is doing gangbuster numbers. It will be interesting to see how it does post-Tonys, because I don't think it's going to win anything. But if it can maintain these numbers, we could see a very long-running hit on our hands. But I'm very surprised that it's doing this well. I mean, I was thinking, okay, maybe it will do better than I thought, but 1,290,000 was way above what I was expecting. Illinois started off very decently with 91% capacity and 728K, and this is poised to be the best musical frontrunner, and is already doing better than Kimberly and Strange Loop has done. I definitely don't know if it will go into like $1 million, but it is off to a solid start, and hopefully next week, because it got a Best Musical nom, it will go to 8s and 9s, and if it could make $1 million, I'd be so happy about that. And I do think it is possible, but even though it is a very high-concept musical, it is definitely a lot more mainstream and easier to understand than Akimbo and A Strange Loop, but again, it is very conceptual in nature, so it will be interesting to see how it plays out, and I think it will have to do, exceptionally well, and there need to be a very high demand in order for it to go to another theater, which I do think 2 theaters will be opening up very soon that I could see Illinois going into, but for now it is off to a solid start, and it is a prestige Best Musical, so it didn't need to do 728K, so this is just icing on the cake. Kimberly Akimbo finished strong with 83% capacity and 627K. Again, not a huge big finale. It didn't hit 7 or 8, but for a show that was doing horribly and should have closed a long time ago, I'm glad that it had such an extended run and that it managed to stay on Broadway for so long. Lempicka is going to close. I'm just going to say it. 74% last week and 71% this week, going from 354K to 288K, and despite getting 3 Tony noms, I think this will close in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I mean, the writing is on the wall. It's obvious to even a pedestrian. It is obvious that Lempicka flopped, and it flopped hard. Merrily went from 1,313,359 to 1,464,492 for 100% capacity. Moulin Rouge went from 99.72 to 99.37, and 1,400,282 to 1,433,475. 6 went from 926K to 845K, and 97% last week and 89% this week. And again, 6 could do 7s and 6s for years, and it would still be on Broadway. So even though it is doing lesser numbers at 845K, it's still doing exceptionally well. Suffs had a very high capacity drop from 93% to 77%, but the gross went up from 555K to 630K, and I think with that Best Musical nom, this will start to do 7s and 8s, and it did a lot better than I thought it was going to. And while I'm not a huge fan of Suffs, I am glad that an original musical is doing better than expected and is doing solid business. So hopefully it will go into the 7s and the 8s. If I'm a Suffs producer, that's what I'm hoping for. But will it do well over the summer and into the fall? I'm not so sure, but again, it's too early to tell. Sweeney did exceptionally well, going from 95% to 99%, and 1,391,061 last week to this week's 1,519,739. So I am glad that it's ending on a good note, and it's proved that Aaron and Sutton are box office draws. And that is cool to see, because while they are on TV and they are more mainstream than other Broadway stars, I think at the core they are still very much Broadway stars. So I am glad that they're making money for a show. Gatsby went from 95% to 97%, and 1,033,970 to 1,028,276 for an average ticket of $88. Obviously, Gatsby got incredibly poor reviews from critics, and it got 1 Tony nomination, so I definitely don't think it's in a good state right now, but I think it could do well enough over the summer that I do think Gatsby at the latest, at the minimum, will be here until at least January. I think it will continue to maintain, $1 million and maybe low of 800,000 something through August. So I think the real test will be in September and October, and I don't think it's going to pass that test. But I was wrong about it doing, good. I was wrong about it in previews, so I could be wrong about it now, because I definitely do think it is a crowd pleaser, but at the same time, I do think Gatsby, could have a limited lifespan, because I think that it is not an exceptionally well-done show, as many people have pointed out. The Heart of Rock and Roll is definitely going to close, as it got no Tony noms, and went from 80% to 68%, and 262K to 371K. The Notebook did solid business, and 85% to 91% this week, and 772K to this week's 772K, so it maintained it. The Notebook is not doing as exceptionally well as producers wanted it to. I think with universal acclaim, it would have made $1 million, and because it appeals to that core audience demographic for Broadway, you could say it's underperforming a little bit. I still think it will be here for many years to come, and I think over the summer it's going to do very well. But I could see it closing in January. I think, again, the big test for a lot of these shows we're not going to know about until the fall, because I think these will do very well over the summer, especially The Notebook. The Outsiders is doing exceptionally well, especially with tons of Tony noms, going from 889K to 923K, soon to be $1 million, and 98% to 97.84. The Who's Tommy went from 82% to 86%, and 1,028,078 to 1,064,542. And I think this will be on Broadway for at least a year with how good it's doing. The Wiz is doing exceptionally well, with 98% last week and 98.32 this week, and 1,481,592 last week, to this week's behemoth of 1,611,118. I mean, this even outgrossed Merrily We Roll Along, I believe, and that's insane. I definitely think this will extend, and while it got no Tony noms and it is a limited engagement, you could say the Marquee Theater curse is broken. And then to cap it off, Water for Elephants did 82% last week and 84% this week, going from 1,032,068 to 1,038,304. So very soft numbers, but it's still successful. And I definitely do think the Tony noms will help Water for Elephants. However, I think it will do not so amazing once we get to the fall, and I think it will close in January. So overall, those are my thoughts for the grosses. Pretty good week for all involved. However, I think Heart of Rock and Roll and Lempicka are definitely the two shows that will close, unfortunately. And we're going to have to keep a special eye out on Gatsby and The Notebook to see how well those shows do. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and comment. And I will see you in the next video, which is the Tony video. Peace.